It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. A weekly program where me and occasionally a panel and various guests call out the establishment's BS and try to dig under the news stories, talk about that stuff that mainstream media is not talking about. Or just big stories, excuse me, that have been flying under the radar, or get an alternative, more radical perspective. Again, as I say every week, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. Well, big weekend. I just got back from the People's Summit a couple of days ago. And depending on who you are, I guess it was either the networking time of your life or a sheep herding event to get us all to be establishment Democrats. I don't know. I'm going to have some guests on my show later on to kind of dig into that into more detail. But first, I want to mention a couple things. First of all, if you're in the downtown area, there is going to be a climate protest today from 5 to 8. And it's related to Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. So, I'll read a little bit from their description. We must not be complacent. The 6th District must unite once more as the corporate establishment is blinded by temporary victory. Make no mistake, severe and direct damage is being done not only to our environment, but to the people's rights to essential services like health care are being undermined by the current establishment. Because the Democratic Party shunned progressive ideals and hence its progressive base, we are now stuck in a pretty bleak situation with a radical right-wing administration that is unpredictable and illogical. As we move forward, we must work together to prevent the unraveling not only of recent progress, but possibly of a great deal of social progress made by the people since the New Deal. The current state of the political landscape potentially threatens all social progress of the last century in areas of environment, labor, fair progressive taxation, social programs, and social tolerance. And so that'll be at Bronson Park right now, as it were. Climate Change Working Group is going to be there. Former congressional candidate Paul Clements also will be, and I've given him a shout out on the show before. He's done some great work putting together our local climate plan for Kalamazoo. So, a big thanks to that. Oh, and also Aaron Knott, the city commissioner, will be there to lay out the specific steps that we're going to be doing here in the city of Kalamazoo regarding the Paris Agreement. So make it down there if you want. You can make it down there if you do indeed care about the human race not going extinct, I guess, as it were. Anyway, it's always, I always try to be as real as possible. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio show, right? So, a lot of people would say, oh, if you want to protect the environment, if you want to, if you want to stop climate. No, I'm like, if you don't want the human race to just go out in a blaze of stupidity, then go do something about climate change. Because that's basically what it is. Let's be real. All right. So let's start with a little bit of good news. Oh my goodness, we don't get that nearly often enough. And for those of you who were not keeping your finger on the pulse of international politics, something very incredible happened last week. When I say the words Jeremy Corbyn, does that ring a bell to anybody? Well, Jeremy Corbyn, he is essentially the Bernie Sanders of the UK. And they got him and the Labour Party, which is basically like united behind this progressive vision that, again, is very similar to Bernie's platform. They made some really big victories last week in their election. So I'll read a little bit from, and this is a good article. I found it from our folks at The Intercept. They do a really good job of summarizing the political landscape in the UK, why this is so important, and just exactly what Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party accomplished over there in jolly old England. So this is by Mehdi Hassan. It's published June 11th. And the title of the article is Jeremy Corbyn is leading the left out of the wilderness and toward power. It is no exaggeration to say that the British Labour Party leader has changed progressive politics in the UK and perhaps the wider West too for a generation. The bearded 68-year-old self-declared socialist has proved that an unashamedly, unabashedly, unapologetically left-wing offer is not the politics of the impossible, but rather a politics of the very much possible. And as a little aside, before I delve into the rest of it, you know, when the author talks about perhaps the wider West too, I think this has some direct ramifications here in American politics. If we look at some of the races that have been fought since the election of Trump, even, you have candidates like Rob Quist, races like those down in Nebraska, where they didn't win, these progressive Bernie-crat-style candidates. But they came incredibly close. And these are in parts of the country that are the reddest of the reddest of the red. So what it really shows is if you have a hopeful vision and progressive policies, which all the polling data shows is in the mainstream, like most popular ideas of most Americans. Even, I mean, a good example, even Republicans, the rank and file ones anyway, a sizable minority of them, about 1/3, are supports single-payer health care. So yeah, these binary divisions are not quite as rigid as the establishment and the establishment media would tell us, and this is a really good case study in it. So I'll go ahead and keep reading from the article and make some more points as we go along. In these dark, depressing times of Trump and Brexit, of the fallout from the Great Recession and the rise of the far right, Corbyn has reminded us that a politics of hope can go toe-to-toe with a politics of fear. Millions of people will turn out to vote for a leader who preaches optimism over pessimism, who offers inspiration instead of innovation. Corbyn has proved that the much maligned young can be a force for change. Younger voters are not lazy, indifferent, or apathetic, as the conventional wisdom goes, but will in fact come out in droves for a leader who motivates and excites them. And that is indeed the young vote, the millennial vote in the UK is essentially what helped the Labour Party make such stunning victories across the board. So, who gives them not just something to vote for, be it a scrapping of tuition fees or a higher minimum wage or a new house building program, but something to believe in, a common struggle, a better future, a more equal society, because something always beats nothing. You hear that, Democrats? Something always beats nothing. Corbyn has showed how it is possible for progressives to build a coalition between the young, people of color, and cosmopolitan liberals on the one hand, and yes, those dreaded white working class communities on the other. It is a fiction to claim that leaders on the left must choose between them or play one marginalized group off against another. White ex-UKIP voters in the north of the country returned to Labour last week in their hundreds of thousands. So socialists and social democrats no longer need to be on the defensive. Yes, mainstream center-left parties may have been crushed in recent European elections, think of France or the Netherlands. However, Corbyn, who spent 32 years toiling in obscurity on the backbenches before becoming leader of his party in a shock victory in 2015, has now paved a road out of the wilderness. To be clear, the Labour Party did not win the UK's general election. Theresa May's Conservatives secured more votes and more seats. It is difficult to overstate, as even Corbyn's biggest critics have now conceded the sheer size of his electoral achievement. Labour's 40% share of the national vote is the highest since 1970, with the exception of Tony Blair's 2 landslide victories in 97 and 2001. Last Thursday's election also saw the biggest increase in vote share for Labour, nearly 10% since the party's post-war blowout in 1945. All of this despite Corbyn having begun the campaign more than 20 percentage points behind the Conservatives, having been written off by politicians and pundits from across the spectrum and relentlessly undermined by members of his own parliamentary party, and having endured an unprecedented... Oh, wait, he was undermined by his own party, you say? Where have I heard that one before? Anyway, Corbyn, lest we forget, was smeared as a terrorist sympathizer, ridiculed for forgetting the details of various policies, dismissed as a crank, and an eccentric. To take Labour's prospects seriously under Corbyn was to abandon being taken seriously yourself, wrote The Guardian's Gary Yonge on the eve of the election. The political class impacted as much to the media class, and the media class duly printed and broadcasted. The wisdom was distributed to all who mattered. Those who did not receive it did not, by definition, matter. On Thursday, they proved once and for all that they mattered, and the quiet, unassuming Corbyn proved that he was indeed a serious and viable candidate for highest office in the land. One analysis found that a mere 2,227 votes and 7 swing seats blocked him from becoming prime minister at the head of a progressive coalition of Labour and other smaller parties in Parliament. As former critics of his now help themselves to bigger and bigger slices of humble pie, Labour leader may want to consider borrowing George W. Bush's famous malapropism, "They misunderestimated me." Goes on to say, I did not imagine that Labour would win seats such as Canterbury, held by the Conservatives for the past 99 years, or Kensington and Chelsea, the UK's richest constituency and home of the Daily Mail. I would not let myself believe, as many others on the left did, that a Corbyn premiership was a very real and live possibility rather than a mad fantasy, a progressive delusion. I was wrong. Completely, utterly, hopelessly wrong, but never have I been happier to be wrong. Perhaps I should have paid more attention. The much-mocked Corbyn had a very clear plan from the very beginning. The politics of hope are not an inevitable reaction when politics fail, he declared in a speech at the London School of Economics in May 2016. Politics of hope have to be rebuilt. Rebuilding, the Labour leader explained, required 3 things. First, a vision to inspire people that politics has the power to make a positive difference to their lives. And second, trust. That people believe both that we can and that we will change things for the better. And third, the involvement and engagement of people to make the first 2 possible. So, the author goes on to note, it's very, very similar to what happened with Bernie Sanders and his politically revolutionary campaign. He goes on to say, neither Corbyn nor Sanders won their elections, but they came so close. Give them a but more time. One more heave is no longer a political pejorative. With Parliament hung and Theresa May under fire from her own party, the next UK election could be held in a matter of months. By the way, if you don't know how the UK election system works, their Parliament, and the way they elect Prime Minister, is much more less rigid than the United States system. If a particular politician does not have enough support in our own party, then special elections are held. The bookies have slashed Corbyn's odds of becoming the next UK Prime Minister, and a new post-election poll shows the Labour leader is now tied with his Conservative counterpart on the question of who would make the best Prime Minister. After last week's shock results, what were once Conservative safe seats are now marginals, and what were once Labour marginals are now safe seats. So, President Sanders, Prime Minister Corbyn, what were once progressive fantasies are now potential realities. The left may have finally awoken from its slumber, and therefore the attacks from the right will only escalate. Well, what was it Gandhi is said to have remarked? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So, I wanted to start the show with this article because, a lot of the time on our show, we'll talk about local activism or we'll talk about national news stories, and a lot of it is very bad news. Especially anything coming out of the Trump administration. So, have a little bit of hope. One of the things that I've seen kind of emerge since last year is kind of a sense of people want instant gratification. And, one of the things I tell people a lot who are down about how they cheated Bernie, they made sure he didn't win. And it's kind of like this author says, but he came so close. So close. I never imagined they being the establishment, would ever let, somebody with those populist values get that close to the echelons of power. And last year, I was wrong about that. But the future doesn't happen overnight, ladies and gentlemen. And if you look at it from a broader historical perspective, the changes that we have made are happening very rapidly, so fast. Even including Bernie, the fight for 15, that was a mere 4 or 5 years ago when that started up. The LGBT community has seen a paradigm shift within half a lifetime, from where a lot of people in the movement started to where we are now, where we have gay marriage and actual discussions about trans rights and fluid. And granted, there's a backlash, and that's what Trump and a lot of his kind of alt-right support, that's where a lot of that comes from. But we've established a foothold in the trenches, so to speak. And the follow-up to that question is, will it be enough? Because here's the dealio. Just by virtue of networking, of the internet, these changes are coming much faster than they have ever before in a historical sense. These patterns where progressive leadership emerges, it's a pattern that repeats itself, particularly in American history, but in a lot of countries in the West. There's a period where corruption and capitalism and a rent-seeking economy get to such a boiling point that a figure like FDR or Bernie Sanders emerges to offer these socialistic policies to basically be a stopgap. And now, if you're a little further to the left, that's actually more of a critique, because it means we're living this constant boom and bust cycle that kind of keeps us locked into capitalism. But if just, looking at it for what it is, we're in that progressive upswing right now. Of course, the stakes have never been higher. And while we might be gaining traction a lot faster than we ever have before, the stakes. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the show, the stakes are the human race, folks. So will it be fast enough? Well, one can only hope. But with this happening in the UK against all odds, about a year to the date of the end of Bernie's campaign, it's a good sign. It really is. And while, we didn't get it, we didn't win that particular fight in America, here in America last year, everyone learned a lot. Everyone learned a lot, and the overall movement has only gained strength and built momentum since then. A lot of that you can thank Bernie Sanders for. A lot of that you can actually thank Donald Trump for, because he got a lot of people off their butts who, while there was about 13 million people inspired by Bernie's revolution last year, there's a lot more who are inspired by just how much of a cartoonish disaster Donald Trump is. And they're ready to hit the streets. And, even a lot of the older generation who I've talked to, they like those policies. A lot of these people, even people who voted for Hillary, they like these progressive policies. They're just, either they haven't or they have begun to wake up to the fact that these policies are actually within the realm of the possible. Because for so long, we have all been told that, things like single payer, a living wage, doing actual attacking climate change on the scale that it needs to be dealt with, that all of these things were a bridge too far. They were crazy, and they weren't going to happen. Well, they're happening. And just like many generations before us, we are now on that revolution road. There's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a lot of distractions. There's going to be a lot of failures, but there's also going to be a lot of victories. The reward, well, the consequence of this not working is the worst possible outcome one can imagine. End of civilization with a biosphere that might not support another one. Human civilizations collapse pretty often in our history, actually. But if we facilitate an environment that we cannot actually live in, what will there be left to be rebuilt from? However, on the flip side of that, the reward is a world better than any of us can possibly imagine. Closest thing I can think of is, you'll be like that Star Trek stuff. Yes. And, honestly, okay, I'll real talk though. Yeah, I watch Star Trek at night, and I'm like, that's the goal, fam. Yeah, let's get there. We need to evolve as a species. Go explore space. Be harbingers of peace instead of going to war because it's a good money-making strategy or scheme. The human race needs to be the best possible version of itself. And it can get there. This might be the start of it. I have to wait and see. Nobody's got a crystal ball to tell you which way this is going to go. I can tell you it's either going to be really good or really bad. Really, really good or really, really bad. It's got to keep pushing. It's got to keep pushing for the good ending. Collect those stars. Find all the hidden items. Defeat the boss 3 or 4 different... would the boss in this case be Trump or like neoliberalism in general? I don't know. Maybe it's like this giant Cthulhu like tentacle monster that's like... It's got like one head's an elephant, one's a donkey, one's like this snake with a briefcase that says Goldman Sachs. It's just coming out of the stomach. Like, anyway, we will be right back. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick musical interlude while I get down to some business. And when we come back, we should have a couple of friends on the line to discuss our weekend at the People's Summit. So keep your dial locked. We got more of the Hoodrat Strategist radio program on the way. Your only source for political revolution. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR FM, your only source for political revolution. So I am joined now by my activist buddy, good friend, Mr. Chris Wood. Chris, would you say hello to all the lovely people out there in Radio Land?
Hello, everybody in radio world.
Yep. And I also believe our dear friend Dave is with you. Dave, could you also say hello to everybody out there?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I hope you can hear this okay, because we're going to start driving. We're still driving back from the People Summit. So we're in Pennsylvania finally, but we left from Ann Arbor today.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. How was the east side of the state? I know you guys have been out there, not only in Ann Arbor, but a little bit in Flint. But did you guys enjoy yourselves out here in Michigan?
Oh, yeah, we sure did. We understand there's some news from Schwenk that one of the officials got convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Did you hear that?
Oh, no, I didn't, but that's some fantastic news. Yeah, I'll have to. Maybe I should look that up and talk about it later on the program.
Yeah, a lot of. We're starting to see some action against these people. I mean, there's definitely criminal conduct there, so good to see.
All right, fantastic. So, I want to introduce you guys. Chris Wood is. He broadcasts a podcast out of Lansdale, Pennsylvania, Think Tank Renegades. And my friend Dave, he's a writer. Actually recently published an article on Common Dreams about the People Summits. And I read that. It was very informative and a really good summary of what went down. So I'll start with Chris. So I particularly wanted to hit you up, Chris, because you had a very kind of pragmatic outlook about the summit. You know, you gave kudos where there was positives, and you criticized those things that, you know, you thought were a detriment. And, you know, in particular, we saw, you know, there was kind of a mixed opinion about the summit. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, not only like how you personally felt about the summit, but kind of some of the criticisms you saw kind of online out there in the left-wing blogosphere.
I could definitely do that. And so I have to set up the context. See, I didn't register to go to the People's Summit. Dave called me up a couple days before, like about probably a week, and asked me if I wanted to chip in with gas, go out to Flint, and go. We were possibly going to go to another resistance camp in Pennsylvania, but we didn't wind up doing that. So I didn't register. So when I got there, I was hoping to just, you know, network. I knew I was going to be able to do that. So that's all I was really looking to do. So the first day, I couldn't even, you know, I couldn't participate in any of the classes because I didn't have the badge to get into them. And I did try to sneak into one because that's just how I roll. And they vetted very well. They made sure that, you know, if you didn't belong in the class, you didn't get to stay. So they, you know, they were notorious for asking me, where's my badge? But in hindsight, I really do think that the fact that it was, you had to register and, you know, that it wasn't just walk-ins, I think that made the atmosphere very relaxed. So that's a highlight, I would say, that the environment was pretty relaxed. There wasn't any, you know, altercations. I don't believe anybody got in any fisticuffs or anything like that. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's always a danger when you have a lot of politically passionate people in the same space. But you know, maybe there were a few at the bars after hours, but you know, I certainly have not heard anything about that. I do, and it's important that you brought that up. I'm glad that you did. I know there was some criticism about the fees, although it was on a sliding scale. I myself was able to get a ticket for about $45 as a low-income participant. Oh, and hold on. Just lost the call. I'm going to call my friend back. Perhaps they were entering a tunnel. They are currently on the road from Michigan back to Pennsylvania. So, kind of expanding on that a little bit. There was a criticism by some people in our activist circles that to have a really inclusive summit, it should have been free and open to the public. Although, I think this
have reached the voicemail box of 4847.
Okay, well, we will try to get back a hold of them in just a moment. But I'll talk a little bit about my own experience at the summit. So, there was kind of this push and pull as far as, what people really thought about the summit. And one of the criticisms, as I said, was that it was on this sort of sliding scale. Now, when you do a grassroots event like the People's Summit, you do need to pull from, individual donors. And, a lot of it came from the National Nurses Union and a couple other places. But the $45 is not too much of a hardship. Granted, and here's the thing too. This was a national summit. There were people there from all over the country. Obviously you want to make sure everybody can get there, and they were also offering travel scholarships to people without the financial capital, or maybe live just a bit too far away to really get there in an affordable fashion. So, I will have to, say, for my part, it wasn't that much of a financial burden, and I don't think it was done to somehow be exclusive or try to, somehow hinder truly grassroots politicians from making it to the summit. As a matter of fact, I believe that the way that the summit was structured was extremely inclusive. Now, there was, an issue, and I will speak to this, that, was a heavy focus on dim enter, which, as a political tactic, I've spoken about this before on the show. This is the one that. Chris, are you back with us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, yeah, we lost you for a minute there. Yeah. I was just telling the listeners at home. So, what another critique that I heard about the summit, that it was a heavy emphasis on dim enter, and granted, there was a large contingent there from the draft Bernie people, but there were some folks there who thought, and some people on the outside who thought there was too much of a heavy focus on reforming the Democrats, and that they didn't have enough participation from groups like the Green Party or from various socialist collectives or groups. Now, as someone who's an independent, formerly voted Green, what was your take on that? Would you agree with that criticism?
I would say that criticism is fair. From my perspective, I think there should have been more Green Party there. That I know there was the Iowa table. There were other Greens, but as far as like the Dem Enter, I don't really think that Dem Enter was really a heavy focus. It didn't seem like it to me. It seemed like a lot of people. It was definitely a Bernie group, but I don't feel like the message was really rejoin the Democratic Party so much as just support progressives in any area, whether they're green, socialist, or Democrat, Republican.
Yeah, and it certainly would seem, what I saw over the weekend, there was a lot of networking between potential candidates. I went down to the down ballot revolutionaries, what'd you say, class seminar, as it were, and it really illustrates that this conference is important because we're talking about building a national movement around people who are running institutionally on these leftist political platforms that have not had a lot of coordination or backing previously. So and I know Dave, you might be able to speak to this a little bit yourself. I know you were down there and you spoke a little bit with Larry Krasner, but for both of you guys can speak to this. But in what capacity do you think that was a positive for the summit, that it really allowed progressive candidates to compare notes and consolidate and strategize?
Go ahead, Chris. I think that just the fact that they got everybody together in one massive area, and that was the other thing too, is the People's Summit was huge, and it was, like you were saying, it was right for networking and organizing. I met so many people from I forget what group they're with, but they were all about canvassing, and I was talking to them, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, I can talk to Michael Pollack, who wasn't even there for March on Harrisburg, and maybe hopefully get them to connect, and then maybe coordinate, and maybe pick each other's brains and learn some new tactics, or maybe something that as far as like canvassing, because Kelly Collison, I want to say her name was, she was telling me, she knows very well, like, what works and, language you kind of put on the signs and stuff like that.
Yeah, Kelly's pretty great. I'm a personal friend of hers, and she helps coordinate a group here in Michigan called Michigan for Revolution. Also, very, very busy young lady. So, Dave, do you have any thoughts on that particular question as far as, how the summit was a positive for kind of like allowing candidates to network? And do you think it's really kind of helping build this progressive movement and insurgency of political candidates with those kind of values?
Yeah, I think it was very good for that. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the strategy of the progressive wing trying to change the Democratic Party from within. I mean, it's a very difficult question, but I would say this, after the summit, I have a little more faith that it might be possible to do that, I mean, we've been screwed over for decades, the progressive wing, by the Democratic Party. I don't know what's going to change. We just got screwed in the last election in the biggest way imaginable. But that being said, having gone to the summit and attended a lot of the breakout sessions, some which featured down ballot candidates who won, some who lost, but they were all very energetic, and they owed, many of them got involved because of Bernie Sanders, and running for office was a way for them to get involved locally or at the state level with the political process. So it was very positive, and hearing those people speak about their experiences was very rewarding, So not everywhere is like suburban Atlanta, where the Democratic Party is your upper-class, white, liberal base, where you have to appeal to the money. I mean, the party is very fractured, but it was a very positive event. And like Chris said, there was a lot of networking possibility. I also interviewed Rob Quist, who ran in Montana and narrowly lost to the guy who body slammed the reporter from The Guardian. So he was an amazing person to listen to, and he was very inspiring. I mean, and he would have won if the Democratic Party would have stepped in and helped him earlier, but they didn't come in to help him until, because in the beginning he was like a 20% long shot. But once they saw it was a close race, they sent in their, but it was too late. I mean, they offered help, whereas Bernie had gone out there and did 4 events for him. So, but here we are. I mean, we're facing this big divide within the Democratic Party, and I don't see how it's going to be resolved.
So, kind of breaking off of that question, so another big presence there was the draft Bernie party. And I know, Chris, I know you had more of a discussion with one of the organizers of that. Now, I have my own kind of opinion on that, and it's not so much, I like the idea of a people's party, but I don't necessarily think that we need to, draft Bernie Sanders for it. And frankly, just knowing his political past and what he's said, I think it's kind of a quixotic idea. Bernie Sanders has already said what he wants to do and what he's not going to do, and I don't really think there's much likelihood that people are going to be able to get him to change his mind on that. But what do you guys think about the idea, especially coming from this conference, of, do we need that People's Party? Does it need to be led by Bernie Sanders, or should we be looking at people within this emerging movement instead?
To answer that, your criticism is exactly kind of the one that I had. And the very first thing I asked them when they approached me and were like, oh, here's a sticker and, can we get you interested in the idea? The very first thing I asked them was, what if you guys do all this effort and then Bernie Sanders rejects it? What's your contingency plan? What's the next thing? So they reassured me that draft for Bernie is still a good thing to get behind, because if they don't get Bernie, they're going to try to get other candidates. They're going to try to help other candidates, and they have other people in mind. They didn't really name off too many. Nina Turner would be one of them. But to be honest, I'm still a little more on the skeptical side. I would say that the last thing we need to do is divide the progressives even more. So as much as I would love to see a progressive independent party, I mean, it's the same thing that Dave was just getting at. Our choices are kind of small here, and I kind of feel like hopefully the people at the People's Summit realize we have to basically re-hijack the Democratic Party, because just like Trump's always doubling down, the Democrats are still doubling down in their efforts to not change. They like being pro-capitalist. They like, being neoliberals and establishment. So,
Dave, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, I don't like the whole idea at all. I don't like it at all. I don't like anyone really discussing the 2020 election. I think it's all so hypothetical. We're facing an urgent moment right now. Right now. We have to do something right now. So to be talking about an election 3.5 years, we could be under martial law then. Who knows what's going to happen? Even if Trump gets run out of office, then who do we have? Mike Pence or Paul Ryan or Rex Tillerson? So we know the next 3.5 years and these are critical years. I mean, it's not like if we had time to build a party, if we had 30, 40 years to rebuild the whole Democratic Party and do all that work, fine, but we don't, because we have climate change. And if we don't do something, it could be too late already. But we can't be, discussing these horse races down the line, 3 years down the line. And Bernie would be the first one to say that. Bernie said when they asked me, you want to run in 2020? He's like, I'm not thinking about 2020. I'm thinking about right now.
Oh, well, thank you, Dave. That is a really good point. And, we were discussing that a little, I was discussing this a little bit earlier where, I was talking a little bit about Jeremy Corbyn and, the victories over there in the UK, and the idea that, we are seeing a lot of momentum electorally with progressive politics. But given, climate is the gravest existential crisis the human race has ever faced. And it's a question of, yes, it's all moving relatively fast. You look at it comparatively in our history, but is it fast enough? And I'm going to lead into kind of a question about, another criticism I heard is that there was such a huge emphasis on electoral politics and political strategy in that frame that, I know Kai Newkirk was there and some of our homies from Democracy Spring talking about nonviolent civil disobedience, but one of the criticisms I did hear is like there wasn't room there for alternative strategies or talks about alternative structures outside of electoral politics. Do you think that there should have been room there for discussions about like different types of civil resistance and movement building outside of just movement politics, or maybe that's something that should be a summit unto itself?
Right. Well, I agree with your last point right there, because look at who's putting on the event. I mean, that was a very expensive, very difficult event to put on. There's no secret. I mean, Bernie, if he was really, my criticism has always, I love Bernie for everything he's done to, re-energize people, get people focused on the issues. But his opportunity for the political revolution came and went when he caved in right before the convention after promising the whole time to take it to the convention. So that was the moment. That was the moment of, okay, are we going to really have a political revolution? Are we going to push it as far, or are we going to cave into the adults in the establishment wing of the Democratic Party, and we're going to give in to them yet again, David Cobb said to me, he's like, primaries are where progressive ideas go to die. And it happened again. So, we're just going to, so we knew going into the People's Summit wasn't designed to be this talk of fighting outside the system. If people are criticized, they should start their own summit. Why don't they do the work to organize a summit? It takes a lot of work. It's great, it's easy to sit on the couch and criticize, but get out there and do the work. I think that's what we need. We need to have a summit. I would have loved to see 3 days sitting around brainstorming how the hell are we going to break through at this urgent moment, this existential moment, like you said. What are we going to do to break through? And, what are some creative ideas? And how do we go after these people? How do we shame the oil companies? There's lawsuits going on right now. There's our Children's Trust, which is suing the federal government because they have a constitutional right to clean air and water. And the government is obstructing that and working against them. So that's some people are calling that the most important lawsuit of the century. So there's many ways to attack this problem, and only going at it the electoral way, it failed miserably. Just like the Paris Climate Conference failed miserably last year, the Paris one. Everyone's crying, oh, Trump pulled out of that thing. Well, it was a worthless agreement anyway. There were no legally binding conditions to that agreement, and all the scientists said it was just a bunch of show. It was like to give everyone, make them say, okay, we're taking care of it, don't worry about it, go back to shopping, and don't change your lifestyle at all, and we'll take care of it. And that's not going to work, because we have to change our lifestyles. We have to change a lot.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, all very excellent points. I wanted to, so a couple of the things that they didn't bring up, and I know you brought this up in your article, and Chris, I know you also brought this up, where, what was also criticized is like some of the things that were left out. One of them being, you talked briefly about like that moment where, Bernie conceded in Portsmouth, Maine, and, one of the things that I heard from a lot of people is, there really has not been, between all of us as friends and colleagues, there's been a lot of reflection on, what happened. in the 2016 election, the 2016 primary. But while it's good to have an attitude where we're not exclusively looking into the past, there also needs to be some strategic and reflection in order to, strengthen our position against these institutions we're trying to overthrow. So in that vein, there wasn't really any discussion about what the Democrats did is exposed by the WikiLeaks, nor was there any discussions or classes about the voter suppression that's perpetrated by the Republican Party, the cross-check system exposed by Greg Palast, or the proven election fraud that happened in the 2016 primary. Now, I heard some theories from some people about why that wasn't discussed more openly at the summit, or there wasn't any attention focused on it. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts of how do you feel about the fact that was left out, and how do you think that could or should have been included over the course of the weekend?
Yeah, well, this is Dave here speaking still. As you know, I did mention my last paragraph of the article. I said, there was a conspicuous absence of this discussion about electoral integrity. I got an email from a producer from Real News Network today. He said, great article. He said, but I differ a little bit with your assessment of that. He said there, in some of the breakout sessions, that comment came up. So, there were, 25, 30 breakout sessions going on every hour. So it's hard to know everything that was going on. I should have been more specific and referred to the panel discussions and the keynote speeches. And he said there was discussion of, the Republicans more. The Democrats, no, there hasn't been a discussion. And he agreed that we should be discussing this, and we should expose it. And I'm thinking my next article is going to be about this, because it was a very big issue. There was, the New York primary and the California Democratic primary. They unfolded like an intentional car wreck, as Greg Palast said,
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, I was agreeing. But finish your thought there, Dave. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think it's a huge issue. And so how can you put all this energy into winning at the electoral, at the ballot box when, facing the system? It's rigged. And, you brought up interstate cross-check. They purged millions of voters from the rolls, nationwide. So it's, that's a huge issue. I'll let Chris respond here.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that too. That's exactly how I felt about it. I was kind of like, I appreciate Bernie Sanders' harsher tone. And here's a criticism is, wouldn't you think that most of the people that are aware of Bernie Sanders has heard his stump speech? So to have that same, like the majority, not the, I don't know, like 60, I'd say that's a little extra. I would say it was more somewhere in the ballpark of 60 to 70% stump speech. 20% he was promoting the candidates and, talking about Corbyn. But other than the harsher language towards the Democrats and the establishment, I felt like that was, missing. I felt like some of the criticism, and to be fair, that's not, Bernie Sanders' wheelhouse is not, he's not Trump. He's not going to punch down. He's going to be polite and courteous and get to the point and then move on. And so there's that. But I feel like his surrogates, like Nina Turner and other people, handled it well. They expressed in broader terms of where the Democratic leadership is failing in its current state, and what direction we need to go in going forward. The other criticism I would have of the event is just I felt like there should have been a slightly more news media outlet there that should have been invited and should have been there to, push a different point of view as well, so that way people can, cross-reference and kind of like Dave was saying, it would have been nice to break off for a couple hours or, have a day or two to really have time to reflect and kind of look back at it and really, like you were saying, as friends and colleagues, we've gone over this amongst ourselves, but it would have been nice to have that gathering of people from all different places. I don't know how many states were represented at the People's Summit, but I even got the chance to talk to somebody from Canada, and I was picking his brain about, Canadian politics and just, learned a lot from him. That was pretty cool, too.
Canadian politics. You wouldn't think that another neoliberal could hold power, but it's Trudeau. Sorry.
Ironically, he's a pretty villain.
Yeah,
basically what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Obama Jr.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to make that word pun, but we've talked about that on the show before, but I don't want to go off onto a tangent talking about Justin Trudeau's problems, but I would agree. And it's interesting you said I was actually in one of the breakouts. It was the attack on democracy, and I met a really passionate researcher and activist named John Brakey, and I have a pretty in-depth interview with him. If I don't have time during the show, I'll put it up on the website, but we talked a lot about election integrity issues. Well, one of the interesting things he said, because he apparently he talked to some of the organizers, and he said one of the reasons they didn't want to do it is because they didn't want I guess the line they used with him was they didn't want people to lose hope in getting active in the political process. If I guess the idea is to think it's all rigged. What's the point? Although, rolling it in, as you watch politics and how it plays out on the ground, a passionate political insurgency, if you have enough numbers, you can kind of overclock attempted rigging. That's effectively what Obama did in 2008 and 2012, because there were election fraud and suppression tactics used against him, but he had enough of a majority that he was still able to supersede that. Moving on to another topic that really wasn't discussed enough, or criticism that I heard, was the intermingling of our political platform with what goes on with the deep state, and particularly like the military-industrial complex. And this is a criticism I have goes all the way back to Bernie's campaign, where he was asked so often, how are you going to pay for your programs? And he would always hem and haw on like, oh, well, we'll tax the rich, we'll do this, we'll do that. But there's always a simple solution. It's like, well, why don't you just reduce the military budget? So I know this is something both of you guys are fairly passionate about. So I just wanted to pick your brains. Do you think, is that something really important you think should have been included? Or are you kind of curious, why wasn't it? And, how does that play into this progressive political revolution that we're trying to play out, and into these issue-based campaigns that we're trying to do all across the country?
Yeah, I also I also brought that up at the end of my article, but I didn't talk about it much. But yeah, I agree with you. That's a problem with Bernie all along. I remember talking to Chris Hedges in March of 2016. Chris Hedges told me he could never support Bernie, number one, because of the Faustian deal he made with the Democratic Party, and number two, his support of, almost unquestioning. I mean, he questions sometimes, but he really supports Israel a lot. And the Palestinian issue is huge, and that's something we have to deal with, and that's a big part. That's part of the military-industrial complex. Look at all the money we're giving to Israel for military arms every year, and that's basically funding an occupation, right? And so he never talked about that. And there are a lot of people who criticize him for that. Yes, I mean, that's like, oh, you can't talk about that. Yeah, well, we should. That's the conversation that has to happen, too. Loud and clear. I mean, they should be coming out very hard on that. So, again, it shows the weakness of trying to run within the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is part of that. You know, they support the military-industrial complex. I mean, I think it goes to, well, who's really in control? Do these parties really even have control, or is there a deeper state that controls everything? Chris?
Yeah, last year during the primaries, I heard a lot of rumblings and criticisms of Bernie for, being weak on foreign diplomacy, and I always stuck up for him because, I knew his record and looked at, most of his stances and knew that he was opposed to the Iraq war, the invasion of Iraq, which I was a part of. So I always wanted to, keep the optimism, but to be very honest, and this isn't a very popular opinion. In fact, I've had some friends really not really like this at all. They think I'm hurting Bernie by saying this, but during his speech, there was nothing about veterans in there. There was nothing. He could have simply said, if he wanted to stay out of, directly with, Dave was saying, out of the Palestine-Israel comment, he could have simply brought up the fact that, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. He could have said something in that, and that would have been good enough for me. But the fact that nothing was said is a big point that I like to bring up all the time, is that my community, the veteran community, feels like we're forgotten about. We go and we participate in these wars, and then we get compensated, we get put on medications, and then we're pretty much forgotten about until we make headline news, or, veterans forgot to take his meds and did whatever. I mean, and that's something that, I mean, and here's the thing too, and I will be very fair. The veterans love Bernie. We supported him tremendously. We were one of the biggest blocks that were donating to him, and he got the endorsement, I believe, by the VFW. I mean, that was huge. So, I mean, there's a lot of support by veterans for Bernie, and I believe, and other people told me too. They were like, "Well, Chris, he always mentions the veterans, and he just didn't do it this time." And I'm like, "Well, this was like the biggest stage he's had. This event was primarily for him." And the fact that, I mean, it might have been an oversight, and, I'm not that angry about it, because it taught me a lesson that if I care about my issues, which is PTS and, making sure the veterans care gets improved, then that just makes me want to run for office even more and fight for it, because I'm not going to wait. I love Bernie Sanders to death, and I appreciate, like Dave said earlier, I appreciate everything he's done and will do in the future, but I'm not going to wait around for a candidate to do what I feel needs to be done.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that, and I think, like, even in this particular speech, he spent some time going after Trump, and I like the way that, unlike a lot of Democrats, he goes at him on the issues, in the sense that he's completely hypocritical to the platform that he spoke on about running when the election was going on. But again, conspicuously absent, where was the criticism of the fact that, Trump said he was going to be a non-interventionist, and he's ratcheted up things since he's gotten in. He's bungled a lot of, the missions. And, of course, we had the strike on Syria. So where that was an area I think he could have also really pointed out starkly and, look at this. He said he was going to try to ratchet down all of our warfare in the Middle East, where he was ratcheted up. So, I think that is definitely a valid criticism to make. Why was that not, discussed? So, Um,
Well, and real quick too, I wanted to hit on something too. Is where I think the other point too is it's a veteran making that criticism. I was wearing my camos to show other progressives and other socialists that there are pacifist Marines like myself that did not get brainwashed into thinking that my country is doing the most honorable thing at the time. And, I wanted to distinguish myself because, there were a lot of people that weren't at the event that were trying to create, falsehoods. And it's kind of like the analogy I like to use is, somebody's trying to tell me what boot camp is like if they weren't there when I was. It's kind of hypocritical to talk about the People's Summit and say what was going on or what wasn't going on if they weren't in fact there to talk about it. So, there's that element too. So I hope people understand that when I'm being critical of Bernie, it's the last thing I want to do, but, staying true to my convictions and what I believe in, I had to talk about it. I actually refrained from posting anything about it for about an hour. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, if I don't say it, somebody probably won't. So I was like, I'm going to do it. And I've had backlash for it because, they're like, oh, you're bringing up this negative thing at the People's Summit and you're, whatever, And I'm just like, okay, well, if you're that quick to call me not a progressive because I brought up a point that obviously concerns me, then, it's kind of hypocritical to tell me to, be silent about it.
And I think that too is that goes back to something I think about a lot, which is no politician or political figure should be above criticism. When Dave, you're talking about things that Chris Hedges has brought up, and those are some things that I did some research into myself. I always like to tell people, he was a big inspiration to me, and I wouldn't be here doing this radio show today if it weren't for Bernie Sanders. But that doesn't mean he's some sort of, prophet or figure beyond reproach. He's got some skeletons out there. And also just the fact that, some of the best things that I saw over the weekend were, all of these fired up, revolutionary-minded people who are ready to go out there and make some change. But also, the concern, both in kind of like what you're talking about with, making sure nobody's above reproach and, the whole idea of building this draft Bernie party. My issue is, why does everything have to involve figurehead politics, particularly if we're talking about a people's revolution? So much of it is based on figureheads. There's even somebody, a water protector, was having a very impassioned interview in front of the auditorium, talking about we can't, our movement can't be based exclusively on these saviors. As organizers and activists, how do you guys feel about that? Do you think that there's too much of a cult of personality aspect? Do you think the movement needs to kind of wean itself off of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a cult of personality. Also expecting someone else to do the work for you, You can't, there's no savior that's out there that's going to save us. There's no UN diplomat who's going to make a great climate accord. It's all going to, and this is the message. It's ironic, but one of the messages that did come out of the People's Summit was the change has to happen at the grassroots level, local, state levels, but more outside of the politics. Again, someone like Chris Hedges will tell you, well, the corporate coup d'etat has already taken place. It's done, our elections are sham elections anyway. So, and I kind of tend to lean that way more myself, and would wish, to me, the 5 people, if you remember, Andy, the 5 valve turners who shut off the oil flow, they closed those pipelines.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
They did that for one that, that has more impact than the 300,000 people who went to march in Washington during the inauguration or whatever. We have to find effective ways to disrupt the system. The system is, they have all the power. They have all the power. I mean, our Secretary of State is the CEO of Exxon. I mean, there's no middleman anymore. They've taken over all the agencies. All of our democratic institutions have failed. So to expect that we're going to change it with all these rotten systems like FERC, the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, which this week Trump is trying to put in. I mean, it's horrible as it is. There isn't a pipeline they've seen that they don't love and approve. They've only rejected one, and I forget if it's 20 years or something like this. And now Trump's going to put in 2 other people even worse he's trying to do. So people might want to try to make some calls about that. But, so we need to talk how we're going to disrupt the system outside of the political realm. I mean, outside of the electoral realm, because the elections are not working. It's just gotten worse and worse.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, to answer that question, too, about, the cult of personality. Everybody remembers 2008 and how Obama campaigned on hope and change, and that was great. Everybody loved that. And then we got more of the same because everybody, from my perspective, and you got to remember, I also lived in Georgia at the time. Everybody put their chips in one basket. They had too much faith that this one man, Barack Obama, he and himself alone, and his admin was great too, but that was kind of secondary. It really felt like everybody just really focused on one man, one person, and I see a little bit less of that with Bernie, but I really hope it doesn't become that. I mean, not trying to sound rude, but there are some people who are still hardcore Bernie or bust. If Bernie went to the Green Party, they would vote for a Green, even if he changed his platform maybe just a little bit. And I think once you pigeonhole yourself in the idolizing one person, I think history just shows it's not a good move. I would highly advise against it, and that's why I like Bernie's message of it's not me, it's us. I really hope people resonate more with that and look up to Bernie and part of the message that he ran for office and he lost his first couple of elections, but he kept in the fight. And honestly, like I said, I would love to run for office myself for city council, and I'm going to definitely run as an independent because I do not want to be influenced by party. I do not want to be told that I can't support a Green candidate if I do agree with them, because that's something too that a lot of people don't understand is there's all this fighting between progressives when a lot of people don't talk about the truth. The Democrats are not allowed to openly support Green Party. Green Party's not allowed to openly support Democrats. The parties are, in my opinion, are all corrupt, and there's a lot of things going on that people don't discuss. So it's to me, it's the same thing as with the Green Party. These people who are honestly thinking about running Jill Stein for a third try, I just think they're absolutely nuts. And I simply suggest, why doesn't she run for Congress first? And they don't want to hear it. And I'm like, well, this is why you guys lose, because you stick to the same strategy, and it's been proven not to work. So.
Oh, yeah. And, talking a little bit about that, it was interesting to me how, in the last election, I've made the criticism that, that was a very unusual election. I think if there was a time that a third party could really exert some political jujitsu, that was it. But, even from people I heard inside of Jill Stein's campaign, none of them really took it seriously or had like the vision to kind of like seize the moment. Granted, she came there after the at the DNC to kind of fish up support, but there wasn't any real follow through from that. She kind of had this idea like, oh, I'm going to continue the political revolution, and then she really didn't. She just kind of kept hammering on Trump and particularly Hillary, and not really speaking towards like how are we going to sustain this in any sort of way, which I think kind of ties into a lot of the criticisms that again, looking for these savior figures when really it needs to be about people disrupting and dismantling those structures, as Dave said.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we need to probe the system in our own unique ways. We need to organize. I would like you guys were talking about earlier. I would love to see another summit that, a little less training, a little bit more trying to just come up with new and interesting things instead of just the tired true of marching, protesting, and I agree more with Dave on. We need to start shutting shit down and
all right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, but we just need to, just like I said, organize and just focus on that.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think probably going to wrap things up. I was going to say, Chris or Dave, do you guys have any last thoughts before we go ahead and let you guys continue on your journey back to the east side of these United States?
Yeah, I just have one final comment I'd like to make. I mean, I believe that our only hope is if we disrupt the system enough to wake people up, and small groups can achieve a lot, and just 10 or 12, Andy, yourself, if we create these autonomous groups of 10 to 15 people, sometimes the bigger the organization gets, it becomes more difficult to do something. And we need to act on our own, or in small groups, and we could maybe align ourselves and coordinate actions, but, people really have to take it in their own hands and try to figure out a way to disrupt it. And we should put out a call for some kind of summit, a revolutionary summit, something like that. And we should do our own. Okay, so here's do you have anything to say, Chris? He's done. And so we're driving very close to Valley Forge right now, just to remind everyone of the revolution and what our forefathers gave up to bring this country about. And we need to be ready to make some sacrifice as well.
Yeah, that's true. The revolution will need writers, but it can't just be from a keyboard. I want to thank both of you guys for coming to talk on the program, and let me know next time y'all need some a rebel rouser on the east side to help out with something. Give me a shout.
We will, brother. We will. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was Chris Wood and Dave Schwenk. Both Chris is a political podcaster. Dave is a writer for such websites as Common Dreams. All right, we're going to have a few messages, and then we'll be right back. Program's going to be wrapping up relatively early tonight. I actually have a political meeting to go to myself, so keep your dial locked. There will be more wider programming later on this evening. In any case, stay tuned. You've been listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, Consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
This is an open slot in the wider clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the support page.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Before we head out, I want to let y'all know about some of the stuff going on around Kalamazoo this week. So, on the 15th, there is going to be... oh, wait. No, sorry. That is not on the 15th. My bad. So on the 17th, out in Oakland County, there's been a call for a Medicare for All rally to put pressure on Representative Levin to support H.R. 676. That is a bill in the House to support Medicare for All. And for more information, you can find that event on Facebook, Medicare for All Rally. Tell Representative Levin to support H.R. 676. And going on in Portage on Monday, June 19th, is the Voters Not Politicians at the KCAS, as the Kalamazoo, that's the Portage, Michigan Senior Center. And that's going to be at 1:30 p.m. And it's going to be that's going to be about gerrymandering, and the guest speaker is going to be former Republican Congressman Joe Schwartz, which, by the way, a lot of people fight against gerrymandering on a bipartisan basis. You know, it's not just a progressive issue. So, yeah, that's Monday, June 19th at 1:30 p.m. And then on Tuesday, on Tuesday, June 20th at 4 o'clock, it's the County ID final presentation to the Board of Commissioners. And that's going to be at 4 p.m. at the Kalamazoo County Government Building. And this is in regards to the County ID initiative, which is to make it possible for our homeless and undocumented population to get IDs. And again, for more information, you can look that up on Facebook. ProKZoo is helping to organize that one. And then also on Wednesday, June 21st, it's first annual E-Race Party, 3:30 at the Northside Recovery and Resource Center, is going to feature... E-Race is Expect, Respect, and Safe Education. And it's going to be organizing people against the school-to-prison pipeline and to make our education system more inclusive to poor communities and communities of color. So, those are all coming up this week. Hopefully I'll see you there. Anyway, this has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR. Thanks for tuning in, and keep fighting for that revolution solution.
Wider FM is supported in part by a WMU student assessment fee. Thank you, fellow Western students, for helping to support Radio Evolution and student media on campus.